fellers? It's Kyler back here at Whitetail Chasing Deer.
My name is Colton Napier.
I'm going to ask you a series of questions today, okay? Answer with your full potential. Try to keep it under 10 minutes,
Yes, sir.
okay? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Colton Napier. I'm 27 years old. I live in Austin, Indiana, and I have deer hunted my entire life. My father introduced me to the world of hunting from the time I was 5 years old on up. The first time that I ever participated in a hunt where I was the one killing the deer was when I was 11 years old. I killed my first buck, which would be here with my bow and arrow in 2008. I killed that buck with my bow and arrow. The story behind that buck is actually a pretty interesting one. Me and my buddy Zach Paisley, he deer hunts around here. He's a pretty successful hunter and a very good hunter and a very knowledgeable hunter. And as growing up, we hunted together and we had a lot of hunting adventures together. And that was one of the few hunts that I actually got to share with him, was that hunt with my first buck. Um, it happened there and here in Scott County, right up the road here from where we live. Had one evening, we were hunting the edge of a cornfield, and he just so happened to go hunt by a pond in some CRP. And I guess he had a setup over there, and he had me in the setup near the edge of a standing cornfield. And about an hour before dark, this buck here come walking through about 25 yards away to the right of my stand that I would be in, as I was a boy then, 11 years old. And I vividly remember that hunt, and I remember the rest of my life. I remember that buck vividly walking through. I remember me drawing my bow back. I remember me waiting for him to be in the perfect spot to stop him and take the shot. I remember the recovery, and I remember the moments I shared with my family, my loved ones. And
Before we go any further, I want to point out a fun fact. This is my uncle. So his grandfather, or his dad, is actually my grandfather that I've talked about in some of my videos. These set of antlers right here was killed from his first buck. You may ask why they're hanging on my first buck. These are the set of antlers that I rattled this buck in with, and just a lot of the stories that I've heard about my grandfather. Just couldn't imagine on how great of a hunter he was back in the day. I'd like to ask you, what was your favorite hunting memory? All these bucks above us here hanging up is every buck that he's ever killed or have a memory with up above us here.
my favorite hunt would definitely be the buck behind me here, this 9-pointer here. This buck here was killed also in Scott County, and this buck was taken inside of a funnel point coming off of a bedding area to a feeding area. And about 3 days before the hunt transpired, I had saw this buck had actually almost run me over. Like literally, I was walking to my hunting spot with my climber on my back, my bow in my hand, and I look across the field and I see this buck, which is this buck behind me, running at me at full speed. And I literally take my climber stand off of me, throw it in front of me, and I'm standing and I'm crouched behind my climber stand with my bow, ready to take the shot. And this buck, literally, I can smell the rut come off him as he runs every bit of maybe 7 yards to the right of my climber stand. I'm fully drawn back, man, 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 can't get him to stop. So I decide that it's better to avoid that area altogether and go to another spot and hopefully find something else. And fate would have it that my father, Tim Napier, your grandfather, would find this buck 3 days later and come back to me. And come to think of it, then I was 15 years old. I was 15 years old at the time. He comes back to me. He says, "Son, the buck you described to me, I found him." That same evening, the very same evening, my father and me, which would be his grandfather, we go and we set up. And he sets up about 80 yards to 75 yards to the right of me. And I'm sure the pictures, I know you have the pictures of the hunt later on.
Yep.
About 2 hours in the hunt, a doe shows up and she walks directly under my stand. And I draw my bow back full draw. I lay my bead between her shoulder blades and I let that arrow fly. She runs about 55 yards, makes a circle, come back, dies within 65 yards within my eyesight. And think of a 15-year-old boy. You shoot a doe with your bow. You're yeah. You're jumping over the place. And your grandfather, my father, he saw this. He goes, shh, no, sit down. Knock another arrow. There's going to be something. He knew. He knew what was coming. And about an hour later, I look. There he is, about 50 to 55 yards through the woods. I draw my bow back, and at the time I had the flu, and it was very hard for me to stop a deer. And so I was trying to, I couldn't really get fully out what I wanted to get out to stop that deer. And so your grandfather, knowing I was struggling, out of nowhere, man, and the deer stopped, and I had my bow draw back. And I remember vividly your grandfather pounding in my head year after year, practice them difficult shots, because you don't know when they're going to present themselves. A whitetail deer isn't always going to stand in front of you and say, hey, here it is, take me home. It's not always going to be like that. You need to practice for the tough shots, but you also need not only to practice for the tough shots, but you need to condition yourself to realize when an ethical shot is necessary. So meaning that you may be able to take a tough shot, but doesn't mean it's ethical. That's your choice as a hunter. As a hunter, we need to know when that is necessary. That intertwines in with this story. The story being that, yes, it was a 55-yard shot through the wooded area with a bow and arrow, but I had a clear shot, and I knew it, and I had took that shot many a times all summer because my father, your grandfather, had embedded it in my mind that was necessary. And so because he did that till this day, I'm able to sit here with you on this podcast and share this hunting story with you that me and your grandfather shared.
There's something I'd like to say that's actually my grandfather wrote on the back of this deer. He wrote, "Keep up the good work, son. Pass this down to my grandchildren. Hunting is an adventure. Love you. God bless." Um, so what's the story behind your monster buck sitting behind you there? Um, I know there's got to be a good story behind that one because you surprised me with these other two that I never knew.
Oh, there is a wonderful story behind this buck. As you see here, this buck here, he is a 10-pointer. He has a double crab claw brow tines. I haven't got an official score on him yet, but he was killed with a bow and arrow here in Scott County. He was killed here in Scott County. My good buddy then, Zach Paisley, which he is still to this day, once again, a great deer hunter. And he witnessed me harvest this buck. And on the same hunt, I witnessed him harvest a doe as well.
Can I stop you for a second and ask you something?
Yes, sir.
Is that the buck you shot a couple days after I rattled in that one buck down there on?
No, sir, but we do have the pictures of that buck I had shot on that property.
Another fun fact about that before it goes on, these antlers here, he took me down to a place where he lived at, and it was out in the CRP field here. Farmers used, I think, maybe once every couple of years.
Yeah.
And we got down there, and I let him use my bow, and we sit down in this ditch, and it was probably a 1,000-yard CRP field.
1,000 to 2,000 yard range across the
And
CRP.
well, I took those antlers there, and I beat those things about as hard as I could. And actually, it was probably about a week after I shot that buck there, and probably I rattled in one of the biggest bucks either one of us seen. If it would have came down in down in range, it would have probably been state record for him. I mean, it was probably but what do you say, a 200 and
It was
95.
definitely 190 to 200 inch deer. It was definitely a lifetime deer. It was a buck of a lifetime, and he had about 10 does he was chasing at the time. But he come out to challenge the rattling sequence, and I noticed whenever he come out, at 2,000 yards out of the corner of that field, I noticed that he cut back in and it come out on the other side of us on the right, about another 800 and something yards down. That tells me that that buck had come out, winded us, or maybe not have winded us, but suspected something, went back, circled us, and come back and entered another position in that field. And I believe that's what persuaded that buck's decision.
But yeah, I mean, if you want to continue back onto that story, I'm sure they'd love to hear it.
That story, it happened about a week before gun season. Me and Zach Paisley, we were out riding around, and we were doing some scouting on some properties that we had hunted a lot growing up, and we had picked a spot, pre-scouted the spot, and we went in there, and people need to know that beforehand, we had spotted this buck many times. This buck had been a dream of ours, and this buck had been a thing of our dreams that we had been trying to chase around that area for a while. And just so happened that luck would be on my side that evening that transpired. And Zach Paisley would be about 45 to 50 yards to the left of me on a setup in his climber stand, and I would be about approximately 60 yards to the right of him in a climber stand, maybe 55 yards at the most that evening. At approximately 4:15 that evening, a mature doe, come through and avoided me altogether and circled around to Zach, which he proceeded to draw back and take a clean and efficient and good kill on her. And she actually died within my eyesight. And within that moment, I saw something on my peripheral vision. And I thought, oh, man. And I looked, and there was him standing there watching, looking at what had transpired. And I thought, well, see me. If you don't, you stand still. It's over or it's not. And this time, it's, how it is, guys. When a deer just stares you down, it's a stare down the center. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like when you get that stare down, it was a stare down, and he realized that something wasn't quite right, but he knew whatever was over there by him wasn't right either, because she was flopping around, spraying blood everywhere. And he come trotting towards me, and that's when I proceeded to draw my bow back. And at about 18 to 19 yards, I took my first shot directly into his shoulder blade, in between his shoulder blade, and managed to cut his heart, the top of his heart. When we gutted him, the top of his heart was cut, and the left side inner lung was cut, and the whole other outside lung was obliterated. But this, where me and my father mounted this buck, this is where we sewed up the hole. I took my first shot, and that first shot was taken with a Muzzy broadhead. Yes, people, it was not taken with no fancy new technology. It was taken with an old Muzzy broadhead. An old Muzzy broadhead made that buck fall within 80 yards.
Now I gotta say, Muzzy broadheads, they've done me lots of wonders.
Yes.
The only thing that I dislike about those Muzzy, especially the Allen brand, is those are the ones you have to put together yourself. My opinion on them, they're good for up close, from like 20 to 25 yards. You get out there at about 60, I mean, it's, in my opinion, it's not the best broadhead you could use. But a lot of people would argue different of that.
That's right. That's why they're called bad to the bone, not bad to the wind. It seems as if a mechanical broadhead has it hemorrhages. It's good at hemorrhaging, and it hemorrhages main arteries. It seems to leave a more massive blood trail. But at the same time, it seems as if you hit a organ that's vitally protected. you might want that reassurance of the muzzle. But at the same time, for people that shoot in their boat all year, this shouldn't be a problem.
I agree. I'm actually
You know?
I want your opinion on this. I'm switching to a new broadhead this year. Do you remember the old arrowheads the Indians made back in the day?
Okay.
There's new ones that came out and they're about that long, about that wide. They're just like an arrowhead. I can't exactly remember what they're called, but I've heard. I mean, I've watched, for instance, the hunting public uses them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm going to go with this year.
I would like to know the name brand of these. If anybody in the comments would like to comment down below and let us know the name brand of these, we would like to use them and see review them in front of you all possibly. If you all have any product